you have a practice or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Valuations Podcast, brought to you by Trulytics, the premier transition management and business optimization platform for the wealth management and insurance industries. My name is Mike Langford, and I'm the host of the Valuations Podcast. And this week, I have some really exciting news to share with you. Trulytics won the Allianz Field Advisory FinTech Pitch Fest last week. It's a huge honor, very exciting to see that news. And for me, it's really not surprising, frankly. I've seen Jeremy, who did the pitch, I've seen him pitch several times. I know he knows his stuff. I know he knows how to work a crowd. He's really good up on stage. But more importantly, when I've seen the work that the team at Trulytics has been doing over the last couple of years, I've seen how the product and the platform has evolved, right? Technically and feature set wise, that's all good. But what really is making a huge difference, and where I think Trulytics is really setting itself apart from other fintech players in the space, is the notion that this team knows the business like nobody else, right? You have senior leadership that has incredibly deep and broad experience in the industry. You have Jeremy, who really knows his stuff from a digital product and innovation and customer experience, user experience perspective, right? You've got incredibly knowledgeable people like Carla McCabe running the professional services and transition succession planning space. So really, really smart people on the tech side as well. But all of those people are not just like staying in their lane with kind of blinders on, right? Everybody's going really wide and deep and getting to know people at every broker dealer you can imagine, every insurance firm you can imagine, talking to advisors, agents, talking to practice management professionals, talking to other businesses who even kind of sort of compete with Trulytics to lead the industry, right? Knowing that if we talk and interact with each other and kind of share some learnings, that we can rise all boats, that kind of rising tide lifts all boats type of thing, because the industry is experiencing a rapid period of transition, right? We know that over 40% of advisors are going to be retiring in the next 10 years. That's a lot of humans that are going to be moving on. And that means there's going to be a lot of new humans coming into the space. There's going to be a lot of moving parts. And Trulytics is right there in the mix of things to make sure that that goes off without a hitch and that people have great experiences during that process. So really excited. Doesn't surprise me in the least that Trulytics came away with a win. So congratulations, Jeremy, Terry, Carla, Kevin, Casey, everybody. Congratulations there at the team. Okay, for today's show, before we dive in, one more little before we dive in thing, we may be changing the name of the show from Valuations Podcast to something else, because we've been having some internal discussions here about the branding and really thinking about, do we only want people to think about Trulytics in terms of valuation? And the answer is no, even though that we still do believe that valuation is the ultimate KPI for your business, right? That everything you do in your business is going to either increase the valuation of your business or decrease the valuation of your business. That's just kind of common sense. However, the reality is, if you are running a business today, valuation might not be the thing that's top of mind. You might be thinking of some other business optimization concepts, right? How do we improve our business in terms of when we compare it to the peers? You might be thinking about things like transition management or succession planning. And while valuation will certainly come into play for that, that's not always going to be the thing that is top of mind for you. And we didn't want people to only think that this podcast is just going to be talking about valuations, right? We certainly will cover some of that content here on the show. We have in the past. But as you know, if you've listened to more than one episode, and if you listen to this episode, that's not all we're talking about here, right? And so I hope that as we change the name, and we haven't 100% nailed that down just yet. So if you have suggestions, send it in, mike@trulytics.com or valuations@trulytics.com. Either one will get to me. We're still doing a little bit of brainstorming. We have a couple of ideas, but we'll get to those. So look out for that. It very well may be in next week's show, you might have a new name of the podcast. Okay, so today's show, I have a special guest. His name is Jeff Concepcion. He is the founder and CEO of Stratos Wealth Partners, and they're doing some really interesting things in that they're trying to take a different approach to a wealth management firm in terms of what they're offering advisors. And I'm going to let Jeff share the story with you. But to me, I found it very interesting because as a student, if you will, of the space, I've seen a lot of different incarnations of firm structure and the support that firms offer individual advisors. And I will say that as Jeff told the story, and as I've gotten to know Jeff and the Stratos Wealth team, and I've seen some stuff on their website. You can check it out, stratoswealthpartners.com. They're doing some interesting stuff that is worth taking note, and you may want to emulate some of this stuff in your own business to help your advisors succeed. And kind of it builds on some of this topic that we've had in the last several episodes, right? Of really investing in the talent of your firm, really making sure that your firm is easy to work for, as we talked about in last week's episode. So I really think you're going to enjoy the show. Lastly, I'm excited to have Jeff on the show because he has a podcast. Stratos Wealth Team has a podcast. It's called The Evolving Advisor. And as you might suspect, I'm a huge fan of podcasts. I think it is podcasting as a medium is one of the most effective marketing and client relationship tools that you can have in your tool belt in 2019 and beyond, right? Just think about our conversations we have here every week. It is like we're in the room together or in the car together, right? Or sitting at the desk together. Whatever it is, you could take your podcast that you're listening to with you and you can pause it and go from one thing to the next. You can pause the conversation and come back to it later in the day. So it's a really interesting medium. It's one of the few that you could be doing something else while experiencing that marketing medium. So it's a non-interruption marketing tool, but it's also one that builds relationships. So as you know, I'm a huge fan of it. So check out their podcast, The Evolving Advisor. Really interesting stuff. They're very in the early stages of that, and Jeff will talk a little bit about it later on in the show. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here's Jeff. Well, hey, Jeff, it's really great to have you on the show. Thank you for carving out the time. I know it wasn't particularly easy because you've been flying all around the country, speaking to groups of advisors and conferences and so forth, because Stratos Wealth Partners is growing like crazy and you're doing some really exciting things. So thank you very much for making the time. I know it wasn't easy.
I appreciate it, Mike. Great to be with you. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, great. So I always like to start these things out by really giving the audience a brief understanding of who you are and how you came to be where you are today, right? Give a little bit of background there. It's always really interesting, and I always liken this part of the podcast to your IMDb journey, right? The Internet Movie Database. If you're ever watching a show or a movie, you're likely to pull out your phone and look at IMDb to find out where all the different actors came from. What have you seen them in before? What other projects they have coming up and so forth. So maybe we could kind of give that overview for yourself. Like, how did you come to create Stratos Wealth Partners, and what were you doing before that?
Absolutely. It's an easy story. By the way, I love that website. It's super cool just to get context on the actors and all that stuff and their backgrounds. And so, by the way, I saw a very cute chick flick flying from Montana to Raleigh 2 days ago. It was called Long Shot. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but I for some reason, I like these chick flicks. The dangerous thing is male menopause is unforgiving. I find myself, even at stupid movies, getting choked up, which I didn't used to do. So I know there's something going on, and I'm just trying to accept it. But it was a real cute movie. It was Seth Rogen and Charlize, I don't know how to Theron.
Yeah.
But I love IMDb. So my IMDb is a short one. I've really only had 2 real jobs. I assume you don't count Burger King or driving a truck or bouncing in a nightclub in Hartford, Connecticut. So,
wait a minute, I want to hear about these. This is great.
it would be Patrick Swayze like. I walked in and I'd been involved in martial arts for a long time, and I walked into the three largest nightclubs in the city of Hartford because a friend of mine referred me, and I asked the manager, "Are you hiring?" He said, "No, we don't need any cocktail waitresses," was his response to me. At 165 pounds, I didn't look particularly intimidating, although I was there for 3 weeks and I was the head bouncer of all three nightclubs for 3 more years following. So, but I don't think that's what you meant by my IMDb background. So,
but a little bit of the background here is don't mess with Jeff is what we're hearing.
Now he's a lot older and slower. In the day, I would have said that. Now I sleep with a nightlight, so I think I'm less formidable than I was in my youth. So
that's great.
My career started with Cigna Financial Advisors, which became SageMark Consulting, which became Lincoln Financial Group. So I never really left. I spent 23 years at one shop. I relocated from Connecticut, where I spent my first year there in a kind of a headquarters role, into the field to build a financial planning practice a long time ago. That would have been in 1988, and have really been an advisor. And then I kind of ran that office in Cleveland where I was relocated, ran a few offices, ran a state, ran a few states. I ran the eastern third of the United States, one of 3 people that ran the whole country, all the while maintaining a practice. Ended up joining the executive committee, bought Jefferson Pilots broker-dealers. And so we had a number of different distribution channels, and myself and 5 other folks, I believe, sat on the executive committee. Story for another day, and probably with an adult beverage involved, but basically fired for cause and thrown out very unexpectedly. www.finra.org would show the outcome. It was deemed that it was an improper termination, and so on. Kind of a complicated story, but long story short, it was a great. I probably would have never left. I'd been there since I was 19 years old in an internship in college. A tremendous amount of loyalty, despite all the changes in the shop. I probably would have never left, and being thrown out was a great catalyst to say, hey, I want to work for myself and start a shop. So 23 years at Lincoln Financial Group and its predecessors, and now we just had our 10th anniversary at Stratos. So that's kind of the short background of my 2 professional jobs that can be disclosed beyond bouncing, driving trucks, and making burgers.
That's fantastic. What's really interesting about that to me is, and I love the fact that this is why we start with this question, by the way, right? Is because the little interesting nuggets come up, that the fact that some form of traumatic event, if you will, career traumatic event happened, wasn't the end. It was actually a new beginning, right? It was kind of, like you said, the catalyst to start something new and exciting. So what was it that you saw in the market? So you have this event happen to you, you're leaving the only place you've ever known effectively, and now you're out there. And I'm sure it took some time to collect yourself and go, what the heck just happened to me? What do I do now? But how did you start to see the world a little bit differently and make a decision that I'm going to bring this new thing into the world?
It's a great question. I don't want to gloss over something you said that's really important about that sort of traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. So my philosophy is it's less about what happens to you, because stuff happens to everybody. It's more important how you respond to those things, right? Mm-hmm. So you could certainly be despondent and 23 years and shown the door, and so it's less about what happens to you in life, because stuff happens to all of us. It's more about how we respond to it. Within 15 minutes of being dismissed, I was picking up the phone and calling people. There wasn't a moment's hesitation. Now, I wouldn't, so I sort of in my mind said, hey, this is no big deal, but I could tell you truthfully, for a year, I had a hard time sleeping at night, because you can control your conscious a lot more than you can control your subconscious mind. So it's not that it didn't bother me, but while I was awake, I sort of dismissed it and immediately was sort of attacking what I felt was a gap between the full service world, if you will, kind of the wire / bank / employee model, mm-hmm. and the independent world. So in the wire full service employee model, you kind of get this turnkey experience and maybe the semblance of a brand, which had pretty much been extinguished because I got fired in August of '08. So 45 days later, the market crashed, the biggest one that we've seen in a long time. So a lot of those brands got tarnished during that time frame. But you're giving up, give or take, almost 2/3 of your revenue if you're in one of those wire employee models for a turnkey experience. And on the independent side, you're kind of getting all that compensation, but you're on an island. So I always felt that there was something in between, some hybrid world where you could have a ton of resources and a great experience and great service, but a lot more of the comp in a firm that was fiscally responsible, independent where you want to be and supported where you need to be. And that was sort of the notion that it had been in my mind for a long time that I had a chance to act on, when I was let go.
That's really interesting that you put it like that hybrid model, because I think as an industry, we are starting to see that on the client side, right? That there's been this a little bit of unease in the industry, especially on the advisor side and in the broker-dealer world, the rise of robo-advisors, that they're gonna kill us all type of thing. But there is this notion of like, look, it's not necessarily one or the other, right? That technology is helping the client, is giving the client a great experience, but they are going to want to talk to a human being from time to time. They are going to need a little hand-holding. It's not like they're going to only be able to deal with all the things in their life just through this app. So the notion that you are on the business side of things, on the advisory side of things, also thinking that way about, hey, look, it's not one or the other here, right? It's not you're only on your own, or you're in this command and control infrastructure. There is a little bit of something in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I had a dinner last night in Raleigh before I flew home, and one of our partners there in the Raleigh office, Daniel, was just sharing over dinner that he has very little concern about robo and this next gen being that different, because he said at the end of the day, people still want to be able to have a conversation. And a guy who sat on our board made a comment that, sure, cars can probably drive themselves and planes could probably fly themselves, but when there's turbulence, you're going to want to know if there's a human being there that can actually make decisions versus a computer. So it's okay until it's not okay. So to your point, I think there'll always be some human aspect of interaction at not all, but at many levels of advice to clients, as well as advisors to running their business, having guidance and interaction. So, and if it can be done efficiently, by the way, there's a very modest difference between what an advisor would get running their practice independently from the financial side to what they'd get plugging into a platform that can provide them a lot of resources. That's where scale and efficiency play in.
I'm glad you used the word efficiency, because we're talking a lot about that at Truelytics, that the things that we're building and the solution that we are offering to broker dealers and the end advisor is all about efficiency. When you think about it, it is, hey, look, let's look at your business. Let's look at these 50 KPIs. Let's do some measurement, and let's understand how efficient your business is operating, how attractive that business might be to another advisor who may want to acquire that business in the future, if you're thinking about transition, but also just from the business intelligence that goes into operating a business effectively and efficiently, making sure you're not wasting time, you're not wasting capital, that you are focused on the things that are most important to your business, so that you can, serve your existing clients better, you can win more clients, you can keep clients longer, right? Expand share of wallet with that business, and not be bogged down in a bunch of stuff that's not the best use of your time or energy, or frankly, money. So I was really interested, as I spent some time on your site, and you and I had kind of that prep call. We talked a little bit about things that, you mentioned that many advisors are feeling a bit overwhelmed about the aspects of, being a business owner, frankly, right? That, many advisors get into the business. They almost feel like it's a job, right? They're a salesperson. They're going out there. They're building their book. They're developing relationships. But at some point in time, they hit this place where, oh, I've got a business here. But many of them aren't necessarily prepared or overly excited about taking on ownership of all the things that you need to do to run an effective business. And so I wonder if you could kind of expand on that, and how you and the team there at Stratos are helping advisors and why that's important to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion today. I was in Montana on Tuesday with an interesting little group that assembled just to share ideas for the day. I didn't even understand what the agenda was, but my nature is typically to say, I look for reasons to say yes as opposed to no. So I didn't even know what the agenda was. It just sounded like there would be a lot of sharp folks there. And in that conversation on Tuesday at Big Sky, Montana, which is absolutely stunning, by the way, I'm not sure that if I'd been there, I think it was 30 years ago. So at that conversation and at many other conversations, and kind of where you're taking this now, Mike, is this notion of an advisor versus a CEO or a business owner, right? And to me, the differentiation between the two is the advisor, when you start off, and I've said this many times, they're wearing 25 hats. Well, the person who 20 years later is still an advisor is probably wearing 18 hats. They're still doing a lot of stuff. They're mired in that stuff. And that stuff kind of creates this ceiling of complexity that they can't really grow beyond. It's only as they continue to divert responsibilities, tasks to others that they can go from 25 jobs when they're a brand new advisor to 21 jobs to 18 to at the end of the day, in a mature practice, in a real business, when they're a CEO, they might only be doing one or two things. And there's lots of other stuff getting done, but it's getting done by internal resources, external resources, partnered resources in our case. And it's only when that happens really that I think that the advisor can be a business owner, can be a CEO, and can have sort of an unlimited capacity to grow when they're focused on only a couple of core responsibilities. But many folks and it's not a bad thing, by the way, many folks get stuck in that advisor role and never evolve into a business owner, and thus end up with a business that doesn't have the ability for true scale.
The parallel is not that far off from a startup founder, if you think about it, right? If you were starting a tech company, and we all read about the new flashy startups in the news all the time, very often it's somebody who has a vision for this product needs to exist, right? So they come up with the idea. They might even start kind of building the product. They recruit a buddy or two to kind of help them get the thing off the ground. But to your point, in those very early days, they're doing everything, right? They're not only they coding, they're trying to design their website, they're trying to raise money, they're trying to hire, they're doing everything. And to your point, at a certain point, though, if that founder of that business is going to be able to grow the business and stay with the business, he or she is going to have to be able to let go of certain tasks, as you will, right? They're going to have to let somebody else do HR. They're going to have to let somebody else do marketing. And yes, they'll have a overview perspective of it, but they're going to have to be able to rise up and allow people who are really, really good, best in class, if you will, to do those tasks, allow them to do it. And that's the reason why, like here at Truelytics, we talk about making that transition from running a practice to running an actual business, like you say, being a CEO of a business.
No, that makes complete sense. And the key is, you have to be comfortable being honest and looking in the mirror and determining what is that unique skill of mine, right? Some people are just great business development folks and relationship managers. So can you have the humility to essentially turn the keys of your operation over to an operator and let someone run the business so that you're just out doing what you do to grow the business? If in fact you're a really good operator, because it's this whole left brain, right brain thing, people tend not to excel at both, then you have to sort of relegate yourself to being that operations internal strategy person and hire the business development prowess to take the firm to the next level. That's not an easy thing to hire, by the way. But I think a lot of people feel like they should be one or the other, whether or not intuitively that's what they really are. So I think looking in the mirror, being honest with yourself, where do I really create tremendous value for the firm? And then how do I staff around don't try and become something that you're not, right? Because it doesn't really work. Embrace what you are. Allow yourself to excel in whatever contribution that brings to your business, and then hire talent around you that's as good as you are at those other core tasks that you're not that good at naturally. I think that's just important to, as you said, evolve from an advisor to a business owner to a CEO.
That's fantastic. So how does Stratos help advisors in that area more specifically? So as I mentioned earlier, I look at this lens of businesses that, every business, and advisors are no different, right? Is focused on bringing on new clients, They want to expand their share of wallet with their existing clients. And of course, they want to retain existing clients longer, right? This doesn't do you any good to be bringing on new clients if you constantly have a leaky bucket and you're losing clients, right? So those three core things to me are the most, everything we do in business kind of touches one of those things. So how is Stratos helping advisors? And you can be as general or as specific as you want with this, but I'm kind of really interested, and I think any listener might be interested in that as well. It's like, okay, how would Stratos help me or people that I know succeed?
Yeah, so that's a great perspective, and I'll kind of hit it at a 30,000 foot level, and then maybe give an example of something more specific and practical. So at a high level, the one word that comes to mind is focus. We've talked about all the different hats that advisors have to wear, many of which are critically important and need to be done well, but don't necessarily need to be done by the advisor. So if it's HR, hiring, compensation packages, real estate, leases, build out, compliance, technology, billing, there are a whole host of things. So I think the focus is the word that comes to mind. The fact that we can alleviate a lot of those very important, but not core to the client experience tasks that need to get done, and do so with scale and efficiency in a very effective manner, allows the advisors to have the energy and time to put into the things that matter most, which really is that client experience, client acquisition. That whole concept, by the way, that I just described, which many people label supported independence, in my opinion, is grossly overused. And I've stumbled onto this little analogy over the last month or two that I've used, probably more appropriate for Ohio and Raleigh and Montana. I was just in Big Sky, Montana. It's a Ford F-150 analogy, maybe not so appropriate in Manhattan. I don't think too many people drive Ford F-150s, but if you had two Ford F-150s in the parking lot and you're 50 feet away, they look identical from the outside. But I think most people that talk about supported independence, when you lift up the engine, you see a moped engine inside of this huge truck. So you've got this great chassis, but not a lot of horsepower to move things along. And when you lift up the hood of our Ford F-150 at Stratos, I think you see a 8-cylinder diesel engine with a lot of horsepower to move that ship along. And that analogy comes about because in this notion of helping advisors to focus in this, and this is not true in all, but many firms that talk about supported independence, they have 9 employees, and the person who's in charge of licensing is also in charge of transitions and is also in charge of technology, and people are wearing multiple hats. And we know that when an advisor wears too many hats, their level of effectiveness decreases. So when we talk about a business services and transitions team, and there are 7 bodies, or a tech department, and there are 8 bodies there, it's not only supported independence to help the advisors focus, but there's substance behind that concept of supported independence. There are real bodies with real skills completing real tasks. So at a high level, I think we help drive those 3 initiatives you described about new clients, wallet share, and retention by helping them focus on the things that only they can do and that they do best. To get more granular, we like to migrate from where most firms like us spend their time, which is mid-office, maybe a bit of back office and mid-office, to front office. And front office to me means in the advisor's backyard. So last week I was in Boston, and one of our advisors has a CPA that's got a really, really beautiful practice, and they're looking to align for us to provide wealth management. Strategic alliances is one of 2 things at our front office that actually help the advisors grow in sort of an inorganic sense. It's not just referrals from clients or more new assets. It's creating spigots that can drive new business. So whether it's strategic alliances with CPA firms, law firms, property and casualty firms, or banks, we try to be very active in that space. We also did a workshop in Boston. So a product sponsor invited us in to talk about M&A, succession planning, and how to be an informed or intelligent buyer or seller of a practice. In those environments, many times we meet people, we make new friends, and opportunities arise. By the way, I happen to have 2 or 3 slides in my deck of Truelytics, and in every one of those workshops talk about the fact that I think your tools are very, very well thought out for either just a quick glance or a deep dive to help advisors understand the value of their business. So again, there's that sort of concept of helping the advisor focus because of all the things that we can do. And then maybe the growth perspective of that is at least the two ways that we try to express that most consistently are strategic alliances and helping them be successful at tuck-ins and acquisitions.
That's fantastic. No, of course. Thank you very much for including those slides. I'm hoping they're helpful and being well received. The thing that you said that really jumped out at me is the fact that you're not just checking the box to say we do this or we do that. You're actually investing in the process of actually making those things happen. We see it a lot of times with service providers where they'll say, oh yeah, we can help you with your marketing, or we can help you with your tech stack. And then you realize, like you said, there's one or two people there serving hundreds and hundreds of advisors, right? There's no way they're legitimately rolling up their sleeves and getting hands-on with these types of things, right? They're just kind of, like I said, checking a box and saying, we do this and we can help you. So I think it's really, really interesting and fascinating that you guys are, like you said, you're this 8-cylinder engine in under the hood of that F-150. You're really doing it. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. So when advisors are going to make a decision, I encourage them, don't take my word for it, right? You need to come and visit us, and you need to come and visit the other two firms. And if we're the right fit, that's great. If we're not, that's okay too. But when someone tells you that they've got these resources and support, look, don't accept it at face value, and understand who the people are in terms of their capabilities, talent, their resume, their IMDb, so to speak, right? Where did they come from? What have they accomplished? And how can they help make you a better business owner? Kick the tires here and kick the tires elsewhere. If we win or if we lose, you need to be informed when you make a decision. Where do you want to take your practice when you go independent? So I think that's super important to address that question and especially the way that you positioned it. How am I winning more of what I have? How am I retaining what I have? And how am I finding new ways to grow? They need to understand specifically how different potential partner firms can drive those key objectives.
That's fantastic. So one of the things you're doing that I think is really innovative, and I say innovative, not quite in air quotes, but innovative for our space, I guess, is where it would come in, because not every firm does it. And frankly, a lot of firms are afraid of this concept, is that you've recently launched a podcast. And obviously, I'm a huge fan of podcasts. Here we are on a podcast together. I love the podcast. I love the style of what you're doing. You and I chatted a little bit about it, what your vision is for it. And I wonder if you could share that here, because, I've been doing podcasts since 2007, right? Since the early days when this thing called the iPod came out, and I was like, hey, I heard about this thing called podcasting. I'm going to give it a go, because I knew at the time I was sending out an email newsletter, and it was being fairly well received. But I thought, well, what if all these people that are receiving my newsletter could actually hear my voice? And I just knew that when I talked to somebody, whether it was in person or on the phone, I knew that if I could hear that person's voice, I felt a little more comfortable with that person. I felt like they were a little more knowledgeable. And very frequently, I like to talk about, we all hear people do business with those they know, like, and trust. But there's two other things that are missing in that. Right. You need to have familiarity. I need to hear you, interact with you relatively frequently, but I also have to know you're competent. And you were just teeing off on that about, we know what we're doing. We're capable of doing it. We're demonstrating of how capable we are doing the things we're doing. So I wonder if you could just kind of share a little bit about the podcast and what your goals are for it, and how it's being received.
Yeah. So I am not a podcast guy necessarily. I mean, on rare occasion, I've listened to them, but, not really familiar with that as a medium. I happen to have gone for a couple months ago and been a guest on a show. It was with Michael Kitces. And I was blown away by the number of inbound calls. So if I heard somebody and I liked what they had to say, it would take a fair amount of energy, not a tremendous amount, but enough energy to Google and find out who they are and get a phone number or an email and reach out. We got probably 20 to 25 inbound calls and emails as a result of that one podcast. And it just sort of a light bulb went off. Unlike you, who is a pioneer, I would say I'm sort of a tag-alonger because you've been doing this for a dozen years. I said, what a great way just to share thoughts and contents and ideas. I mean, I like to share, and this seems like a really neat way, not to share my ideas so much, but to, get folks from the industry on the phone and talk about the concept for our show, which is evolution. The notion being that what got me here will clearly not get me there. The notion of Control Alt Delete, clear the screen. If I wasn't doing today what I'm doing, what would I be doing if I was launching a new business or coming into this space? What's still relevant and what needs to change? So this whole concept evolution, to me is really intriguing when you get into the wealth management space. What are clients demanding? What technologies are available? What experiences are people looking for? What's the difference between consolidation versus concentration, because there's a great misnomer there. So where's the space headed? And hearing from some of the brightest and the best, their views about where the space is headed in any of those realms, to me, was a topic that would be fun to share, and a podcast. Again, I had this epiphany, not a bad way to, again, share ideas with a lot of folks. So it's super cool. And I would congratulate you. That's incredible that you've been doing it for a dozen years. Very, very cool.
It's very rewarding, but it's also, on the selfish side, if you want to call it that, what I individually get out of it too is it's somewhat, therapeutic, if you will, where you're talking with other people, or even if you're sharing your own ideas, it's just you and the microphone. It helps you articulate your ideas a lot better, right? It's different than writing. Writing, it serves its purpose, and a lot of people consume content via writing. But the thing about the podcast is, that at some point somebody is actually sitting there with you, that you're having a conversation with another human being, and they might be listening to you in their car, at their desk, in their ear pods as they're walking around their house, doing housework or whatever. But that you are kind of there with the person. So it really just takes another shape, if you will, and amplifies your connection with people. So your podcast is called the Evolving Advisor Podcast. Where they can find it on the website, which is stratoswealthpartners.com. Is it on iTunes and other places as well?
I believe it's on iTunes and Spotify. I think if they just Google, it'll show the different ways that they can identify it. By the way, the one thing that's unique and funny that I didn't mention, embraced by some and shunned by others, is this notion that every episode ends with podcast karaoke. So the guest has to sing a song. And I will say that some folks have been more cooperative than others, but we've coerced virtually everyone to participate, which is kind of funny. Just a sort of a silly way to end, hopefully a lot of good content, and then just to end on a light note.
Oh, I kind of feel like I need to get on your podcast at some point in time. Absolutely. I got to find a song that I know I can just nail it and feel like I'm going to live on forever in this song. This is fantastic.
That's hysterical.
I've actually never done karaoke, and at some point in time, I know I'll be goaded into doing it, but I have this little bit of I've got to figure out what's my jam, right? What's the song that you'd go and you'd have a blast doing it, but you also know that even if for some reason you drop your glasses and you can't read the screen, that you could just kill it. I got to figure out what that is.
So start working on the song, because we're going to make that dream come to life with your broadcast of your podcast karaoke song.
That's fantastic. Well, very cool, Jeff. This is wonderful to have you on the show. How else can people, so I mentioned stratoswealthpartners.com is the website. How else do people reach out to you and connect with you individually and the firm?
I suspect LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Through email, which I suspect is on the website. Okay. And I think my cell phone's on there too. But in every one of these workshops I do, I give out my cell phone. And if somebody wants to pick up the phone and chat, I'm a student of the business. I love the industry and I love to talk shop. So I'm happy to give out my cell phone if you think that's appropriate.
Well, that's completely up to you. Yeah, absolutely. If you want to, we'll take it.
Yeah, it's 216-469-7007. People kind of chuckle in the workshop when, I say my cell phone is X. They said, but I love it when someone's especially because a lot of these workshops are about succession. We've stopped people from making some really, really poor decisions. And it's not a 45-minute call. It's 10 minutes just to kind of give them the notion that they're on track or they're not, about a move. And in this particular case, it's about an acquisition. Typically they're buying or selling. And to me, that's 10 minutes well spent if you can add material value or prevent someone from not doing a good deal. So
that's fantastic. And chances are, if somebody really wanted to find one cell phone or my cell phone as an example, they could probably find it. So I am not overly paranoid about that. That's fantastic. Great. Well, I've really enjoyed having you on the show, Jeff. I'm looking forward to someday in the future getting on your show and ripping my karaoke appearance. It's going to be great. Thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Mike. It was a lot of fun. Much appreciated.
All right. Huge thanks to Jeff Concepcion and the team at Stratos Wealth Partners. Everybody was a very big help in making this episode happen. I'm very appreciative. We had a couple of technical difficulties, as is the case frequently when you're recording remotely with somebody. It's bound to happen, right? Be patient when it does happen. And I really do appreciate the stick-to-itiveness everybody had to make sure that this went off without a hitch. If you get a chance, go check out their podcast as well, The Evolving Advisor. That'd be great. Really interesting podcast concept. And they're in the early days of their podcast. So check it out for them. And then, as always, send in your topics. This show is for you. Always love to hear from you and hear what you might want to hear about, or what's going on in your business. What are you trying to grow through? And maybe we can tackle that topic. Then lastly, tell a friend. Right? Make sure you let a colleague know you're enjoying this podcast, so they should give it a listen. Like and share it via iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast jam on. We are there with you. And of course, you can just come to the truelytics.com site and click on the podcast there. All right. Hope you're having a great day, and we will talk to you next time on the soon to be renamed Valuations Podcast. See ya. Bye.